Welcome back, beautiful people. This is another episode of An Untold Narrative where we host creators from all over the globe. Today's guest is somebody who is wildly accomplished. His resume goes very, very deep, longer than I can spend 5 minutes rapping away at. He has spoken, I believe, on TEDx, maybe. He has spoken at different colleges and universities. He has two books, or is in the process of writing a second book. He has worked for the biggest of names of companies like Nike, and he has his own agency as the creative chief creative officer of Life Design Life. Is that correct, Kevin?
Dreams, Design, and Life.
Dreams, Design, and Life. And so we welcome Kevin Bethune to the show. Kevin, how are you? Where are you? What's cooking?
Thank you for having me, David. I'm coming to you from Redondo Beach, California, just outside of LA.
Amazing. I want to ask you something that maybe you've never been asked before. What I just rifled off like a zillion different things. People who would, if they're in their careers of creativity, they would dream to have all of those accomplishments. What's missing in your life?
What's missing in my life? Wow, that's a really good one. I start this conversation with a heart full of gratitude for the experiences that I've been a part of. In terms of what's missing, I think curiosity is going to carry me to whatever that is. There's things that I'm very curious about that I haven't necessarily accomplished yet. And so I want to go do those things. And it's probably professionally in the vein of incubating my own products that I believe are representative examples of how design and or artistic expression could be sort of manifested. I want to bring, new stories to life. And so there's a lot of stories in my head that have yet to be conceived or yet to be created.
Okay, so it's pretty much all internal things that are missing in bringing those to the forefront and making other people be able to either physically or emotionally touch.
Indeed.
That's amazing. And so you've obviously been able to do these different multi-hyphenate creative outlets. Every guest that I feel like we speak to on this show is now in 2024 a multi-hyphenate. Do you find that that's just like a necessary this day moving forward? There's so much pressure on creatives to constantly advance. I feel like where we're maybe not even creating for the sake of our love and passions anymore. It's just to quote unquote keep up with the Joneses of like we have to do these different things, and it's causing a lot of stress, anxiety, imposter syndrome. I hear all the time from people. Like, what do you think about all of that?
No, I'm definitely coming to this conversation having experienced what it means to like live at the blurry boundaries between disciplines, and I've had experiences where I've had to do that necessarily earlier than most people have had to do it, and there were numerous times, and even still, I feel it, like the imposter syndrome, the feeling ungrounded, not feeling comfortable in one's skin when you're in a ambiguous situation, and maybe you're not sure quite what to do, and maybe the stakeholders around you don't know necessarily what to ask for. And in this environment, like especially with the recent economic volatility and disproportionate layoffs affecting creative fields and these kind of things, generative AI, all those things. I think it's imperative that we kind of settle in. We have to realize that the days of the stepping stone progression, like I got to follow the Joneses and do these things, I think we have to divorce ourselves of that mindset, because if you think about it, if you're unsure of yourself, any landscape is volatile. Any landscape is uncertain. We can't go into a big company, for example, and expect to retire in 25, 30 years, like maybe our previous generations did. Layoffs are part of our reality, or things outside of our control could affect our job in those situations. Or on the other extreme, if you're in a startup or in an agency, it's equally volatile. There's no sure guarantee that that platform that you're a part of is going to be existing in 5 years. So you might as well settle in and say, okay, take an inventory. What have I done? What am I good at? Where do I need to develop? And I do think the complexity of our times, and as well as what's going to happen in the future, is going to require us to be a bit more polymathic, multidisciplinary. but it doesn't mean, I'm not suggesting that we be all things to everyone or that we try to be hyper generalists and never a master of any discipline. I tend to think of it in terms of breadth and depth. We are going to be in multidisciplinary teams. So how do we uniquely as an individual connect with different people, collaborate, communicate? But then like, what are the depth of craft, the couple areas that we still want to be like best in the world at, and continue to make sure we get experiences that continue to hone our depth of craft.
I love that. So how do you divide that up in terms of your expertise and kind of the things that drive you, right? Is it 60% still native design and creation? Like you still do these beautiful sketches, as you call them, and you show artwork to the world of like, hey, I can still draw, motherfuckers. Like I put pen to paper. And then you are able to public speak in front of universities, thousands of people. And so like, is it 60% design and that's like your core? And then it's broken up into another 20%, another 10%, another 5%, another like, how do you divide up all the different things that you do? Or like for anybody listening to take that advice, if they're dissecting themselves, how do you figure out what that breakdown is or looks like?
It's a very thoughtful question. And honestly, for anyone that like scans my LinkedIn or whatever, they might see the very disparate jumps between not just disciplines, but radical fields. But when I do take a step back and inventory, what is my breadth and depth formula? I can say I've spent a long time in physical product creation. I tend to lead my multidisciplinary sort of perspectives and professional approach. I lead with design being my tip of the spear. So I definitely believe in the classic practicum of design, of discovery, of ideating, diverging, converging on an answer, testing, and on the like. I do believe in co-creating and participatory design with my customer and teaming with them because they're I'm not the smartest person in the room. Let me team with someone that's lived in that arena and like let's figure it out together. Like so that approach, I try to go as deep as I can and be thoughtful to like what is going to take to successfully execute a good product. But then to your point around like the breadth of like where does the remainder sit? Because I've had the privilege to sort of live in spaces that define the future of certain types of jobs that exist today. There's a lot of perspectives that I think others could benefit from that I feel responsible to share to help our industry forward. So that's where the public speaking, the writing, like how do you codify this stuff to help larger groups of people beyond just me and my teams so that they can benefit and not have to go through as painful of a trial and tribulations to get to these epiphanies and to be able to do the work. Like, let me just make it easier for the next person by codifying the lessons that I've learned over time.
I think there's something really beautiful in, and I've had this conversation with a number of people of like, when you realize and stay true to like your core, and if your core is design or art or whatever it is, and then you go out and be in service of others, sharing that message, you'd actually be surprised as to how many opportunities even come in from those different, whether it's writing a book, whether it's public speaking, whether it's teaching, or whether it's whatever, they'll actually funnel back into the main core. Have you found that? Like what's a tactful way somebody can approach that, right? Like they know what their core is, but they haven't done any of the other ways of expanding their mission or their message, and then being able to see like that flywheel. Like you have a successful, consultancy business that you run, and so like how do people generate that for themselves?
Yeah, no, a very thoughtful question. And upon reflection, I was introduced to a word in a past career chapter from a mentor that he introduced me to the word called eminence. And I noticed this in my last job before I started my practice. I was I was a creative co-founder of this incubator that BCG acquired, and they really scaled us. But fast forward, as we navigated that scaling of that platform inside of a juggernaut parent company that was known for certain things, I noticed that parent company, BCG in this case, was very intellectually curious about sharing knowledge. So aside from consultants, collecting fees for their cases and projects, they were always writing. They were always speaking on the learnings that they had from those cases. And I noticed that, oh, wow, it wasn't just for ego stroking. They were disseminating knowledge in conferences or through writing, through periodicals. And the fact that they were part of communities sharing that material, they could bring back material from that community, that inspiration and those best practices back into BCG and
Wow.
make BCG stronger, more relevant to the clients. And so, to your point, it was a circuitous flywheel. So I think sometimes we forget that, we're as unique as fingerprints, right? There's no one that's the same. And our lived experience or professional experience has a lot of value, more than we give ourselves credit for. And the more that folks like yourself creating platforms like this, or choosing to write books, whatever it might is, even publishing their artwork in public forums and having the vulnerability to do that, that is no small act. Because you are giving, just by doing that, you're giving someone else permission to then share their stuff, and we all learn together, and it comes back. The more you give, it comes back tenfold.
Wow. Yeah, 100%. I love the word vulnerability. I try to practice that, not only preach it, but practice it. And I think you're spot on, is like, you'd be surprised how many people are scared of vulnerability, but then the people, once you do it, you only see good things. Like, I've never had anything negative happen from being vulnerable, right? It's like kind of this invisible barrier that we put on ourselves for whatever reason. And then once you pass that once, it's like nothing ever bad happens from being more vulnerable.
You're right. You're so right.
It's pretty incredible. We spoke about the person who's maybe now knows what their core is and then doesn't know how to like gain momentum. The opposite of that is what do they say? Due to the jack of all trades is a master of none. So you have the person who now does 15 things and they're chipping away, and they, block off in their calendar an hour for this, hour for that. Like, they're really good at segmenting, but maybe it's too many things. Like, I assume you've had a point in your life where you were doing too many things, maybe achieved burnout, maybe
Yeah.
you were feeling anxiety all the time and you didn't know how to stop. Do you have an experience like that? Like, what would you say to the person who's trying all of these things? They've taken the step in trying more things, but now they don't know how to slow down to figure out or hone in or become a master of certain things.
It was probably the Nike environment for me. That was probably, at times, it was the best times. I'm sure you can relate from your industry experiences. I guess the most inspiring place one of the most inspiring places you'd ever want to work. And at the same time, it was probably the hardest in terms of learning how to feel comfortable in my own skin, because I had a lot of vacillating curiosities at that time, and the world was changing outside of Nike during that time as well. Like, multidisciplinary notions were starting to seed in the marketplace beyond Nike. And as much as we were trying to percolate some of those things inside, and like the curiosities were maybe taking me in a direction to experiment, which is a good thing. But also, I might have had a certain title at certain chapters of my Nike career where there were all kinds of expectations that people had of me, because they thought, oh, you were able to do that output well, so you're known for that. That's what you're good at. Do more of that. And it just kind of snowballs. And I felt, again, like way out of pocket, imposter syndrome, never feeling sure, never feeling like my feet were planted. But thanks to some good mentors, I learned the eventual practice of like almost like quarterly inventories and annual inventories, even on butcher block paper, of mapping out what are the things I've done, what are the sort of fuzzy visions that are starting to materialize based on those learnings, what gaps do I have to be able to achieve and fulfill that vision, and how do I settle myself to understand, like, how do I make sure that I'm known for those couple of things, not everything, but there's a couple of things, and are my experiences getting me there, or am I doing too much? To your point, what do I need to start saying no to because I'm compromising myself of being able to meet the vision? So literally, in my closet, I have like, historic butcher block examinations of my path that I've had to repeatedly sort of revisit and resketch to figure out, am I still on track?
How you mentioned ideas or brainstorming with mentors over your career where, maybe they offered you a pivotal piece of advice, or they gave you a suggestion of, calendar blocking, or doing these
Yeah.
segmented, quarterly, self touch points or whatever it is? For a lot of people, they don't have those. Personally speaking, I've never really had a mentor. I've just kind of always been curious and consuming other, like, people that I admired from afar, consuming their content, which theoretically is like by the transitive property, you're kind of learning from them on a regular basis. Like, for those who don't have, key people in their lives or anything like that, like, what would you say is something that they can lean into to try to shape the better future that they could have if they, heard the right thing, or,
Mhm.
started practicing the right things? Like, I know that's very subjective, but like, it sounds like you had key touch points. Maybe it hasn't always been great, but you did speak to certain people to guide you. What if somebody doesn't have somebody to guide them?
You know, I think at the lowest common denominator, and I think you've said it, and you're doing it, like, you're curious, so you follow through. You read that book, you follow that luminary, even though you might not know them. You absorb perspectives like a sponge, and it makes us better, right? I do recommend, though, for any one of us, and I have to challenge myself to do this too when I fall off track, is make sure that I'm spending some calories with a community outside of my day to day reality. And I've been running my practice for 6 years. We're a small company, and it's ever more important that I bolt myself to other people beyond the few of us in our small echo chamber, because otherwise we get, like, things get weird.
Yeah.
So, um, but I've been fortunate to say, like, every chapter of career I could point to a community where I've learned a ton from, and I've never maybe benefited perhaps from, like, formalized mentorship programs that a company might try to program into their employee base. That's never worked out well for me. But if I do make it a point to spend a little bit of time with people outside of my day to day reality, it could be getting a coffee with someone. It could be
Hmm.
part of a community that you're just a part of and you're regularly attending. Um, and there you find these little open doorways where it's like, okay, there's a conversation that was had, there's an inkling of trust, because I think that needs to be there, and it needs to be with someone or a set of people that will take the time to understand a little bit more of your story than just your title.
Hmm.
And then it's like, okay, there's a relationship here, and you may not call it a mentor mentee relationship for months into that, until you realize, oh, you're actually mentoring me. and and honestly, like, for any mentee that I have or any mentor that I have, it's always two-way learning anyway. So there's no, like,
Mm.
power, there's no subordination. We're just exchanging learnings with each other, and we're benefiting from that. And that proved critical at a few big inflection points, big forks in the road in my career, where I had the decision to stay comfortable or jump into an ambiguous situation where I was very uncomfortable. But I'm thankful for, a few of those pivotal mentors that were brutally honest with me to help me navigate those choices.
So I am so stoked you brought that up, because you mentioned at the start of this conversation, we are in very turbulent times, from layoffs, especially, like, our connection is footwear, right? So the footwear industry specifically, there's a lot of tension right now. People don't know where the market's going. They're very scared. There's brands who have already done layoffs or are going to do layoffs, even moving into the summer months. And so it raises, I've had tons of conversations with creators who don't know, is this the inflection point where I try to do my own thing? Or
Mm.
do I try to find another job, or do I switch careers, or do I do this? You just talked about, hey, I've experienced something where I had to jump into the unknown, which is the scariest thing. But hey, look at me now. It's worked out okay. What, relatively speaking, what would you
Mhm.
say, like, should everybody take that jump into the deep water that's
Mhm.
very dark and unknown, or is it for specific people? Or, like, what would you say, like, do you have any regrets about that? Do you think, like, oh, what a life it could have been if I stayed stable and, worked in corporate America for 30 years and then retired and had a beautiful 401k? Like, where do you stand on all of this?
Yeah, no, I will say that entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It's sometimes it gets glamorized on social media, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, flash in the pan startup, unicorn exit, and all the accolades, all the wealth build. Like, yes, those things can happen, but for most entrepreneurs, it doesn't happen that way. And if anything, the market is brutal. Like if you're not fully authentically connected to your value prop, whether you're an agency, whether you're a product startup, whatever it might be, if you're not authentic to what you're trying to do and you're not learning from your stakeholders and getting better and better at your craft, the market will sort you out, and it'll be a very difficult road. And even with things working in your favor, it's still going to be difficult. Like I've had patches in my 6 years running this practice where it's like feast and famine. Like you gotta deal with the famine sometimes, and the uncertainty of where that next invoice is going to get addressed. And so those painful moments are there for someone that has all the variables together. So you better think about like what foundations are in place to be able to make that jump smartly. What experiments can you run in your present work to like learn, like, okay, is there something here that would enable me to stand on my own value prop? But can I learn that? Can I learn those lessons on my current job and be an entrepreneur in my current job to figure out how well I can do certain things, how well I can cultivate business, how well I can make that project smarter than what the brief asked for, and be that entrepreneur to figure out, like, am I building credible relationships with my value prop where I'm getting resonance with other people that would vote on me, not just the company, but they would vote on me.
Mm.
And you get enough of those signals over time. It's like, okay, when I leave the nest for whatever it is I'm doing, those relationships are worth their weight in gold, more precious than gold, actually, in that you can have faith that those relationships will bring you more opportunities over and over again. And that's been my thread of faith with this business for 6 years. It's the relationships come full circle time and time again. I can always rely on relationships bringing me great work. And that's what I'm probably most proud of.
Wow. That's awesome. What would you say is what would what would you say is the right moment? I think that's anybody teetering with this thought or this concept, right? There's like the perfect moment to jump, right? Yes, they're at an environment, maybe they are at a startup or they're in corporate America and they have these, let's say, entrepreneurial tendencies. They've always done above what's been expected. They might want to take the risk. Do you believe in a perfect time, or is it like when you've maximized these micro experiments while it is slightly safer to then jump?
Mm-hmm.
Like where does your brain stand on like the perfect moment?
There probably isn't one, but you definitely want to make sure that there's enough evidence that you've cultivated to say, I feel momentum. But again, like, you also have to recognize that when you jump, you're going to have a new phone number, a new email address, your new brand that no one knows exists, and it will feel very quiet. It will be the quiet will be deafening quiet, and it's like there'll be several weeks of that until your network wakes up to the fact that you exist. And then, granted, you're out there kind of doing biz dev to get things started, but the more you sort of like settle yourself in that quiet valley and say, okay, there's an authentic reason why I'm doing this. I have the evidence trail that backed up the why. I'm able to articulate the value prop. I'm able to point to examples. And assuming that you've been active in communities where there's relationships, people are going to start noticing and picking up on the fact that, oh, this person, their business can provide value for what I need. And usually it's not your primary network that is your first clients, because they're busy. Like, our friends are busy when we make a jump. They're not going to be like available to like support us and give us work and revenue. They're busy. They got jobs, they got priorities. But what happens, I found, is that there's a secondary network of folks that I haven't met. And my primary network is like, oh, they're able to then play the matching game. I heard you need this product execution, or you need this strategy, or you need this future vision, Kevin or David in this case can connect the dots and make it happen.
Wow. Okay. I love that. Trial and error, folks. Do as much to feel comfortable. Speaking of comfort, one thing that I wanted to bring up, because I know that you've explored a little bit, which is causing a lot of people discomfort, is generative AI, especially around the design and creative fields. How have you been able to navigate those very, very murky waters where we're still trying to figure out, what's normal, from even like an IP standard, my sister is a PhD doctor who teaches at a university, and she gets students to still submit essays which are generated by AI, and naturally can't accept those. And so on the creative front, like we do see these sketches turning into these beautiful 3D renderings and stuff like that. Like, where do you stand on all of it? Like, what is your immediate reaction to it? Are you implementing it into your practice, like to be, more efficient? Like, how are you approaching all of it?
I definitely will first say I'm not an expert at this stuff. I don't think anyone is. I'm learning just like everyone. What's helped me is I have looked to a couple luminaries that have been, further ahead or further along in their experiences. One is Dr. John Maida, who's now a VP of Design and AI at Microsoft. Another out of Israel is Annette Lecter. She also teaches at NYU. Has done a lot of AI work in her color research practice. And then Chris McKay, who runs a media company called Imaginative, where he curates a lot of the articles on generative AI in a very digestible sort of feed to make it more consumable. And I will say that following them and just starting to run little experiments, I sort of look at the design or creative process as a very nonlinear array of choices that we can have, whether it's discovering, ideating, testing. Like, it's not this clean, circle of steps or double diamond. The reality is it's never that clean. Now, generative AI is great for formulaic, linear things. You can have it automate tasks, and I'm using it in ways where it's like, okay, if I'm doing if I'm researching customer sentiment, I might use some of the tools to get an initial perspective, because it's going to sweep a couple LLM, large language models, to give me a cursory set of answers that can help me define an initial framework to really go investigate. So it's made my research a little bit more efficient. When it comes to ideating, if I sketch a few directions, I could feed those into a Midjourney or DALL-E and have it continue to do more explorations. But I'm only going to take it with a grain of salt. I'm going to extract the things that I like, but I'm going to continue to creative direct and steer my next set of sketches. If I want to generate a stimulus for testing concepts with stakeholders in the field, I might use some of these tools to generate stimulus that I can use as design probes. I'm not wed to what it produced. They're just artifacts, right? Low calorie artifacts. Have the tools generate that stuff for me so that I can go into those conversations prepared. Those are just examples where I see it seeding across the process, but I'm still in control. And if anything, I feel like my creative direction, my creativity, my critical thinking is elevated because the automated stuff is making me more efficient. So I think the more that we experiment, the better off we'll be of understanding it. I think to quote Miss Lechner, it's not the AI that's going to take over the design job. It's the designer that uses AI that will take over the job of the designer who doesn't. So I think that's sort of the reality that we're facing now.
What if somebody has no experience in this and is listening to this, what would you say is the best place to start?
You can start by following people that have been experimenting, and there's a ton of open source entry points, right? We can all do cursory experiments with ChatGPT or Midjourney. A lot of these tools have freemium models where you can start to try it for free. So there's a lot of low calorie ways to get in and test and just experience the act of prompting and what it gives back. and how the prompts, you can daisy chain the prompts to get tighter and tighter to the fidelity of prompting that you want to provide, and learn how to feed it your analog outputs to see what it gives you back. Just start to play and immerse, and also follow other people that have experimented longer. And there's a lot of insights that you'll walk away with to figure out like how does it make your approach more relevant and more efficient. I think that's what we each need to figure out how to do.
Okay, I hope people are listening. You just mentioned a word that triggered a new question for me, which is relevant and relevancy. And I personally think that it is a really important word, but I've heard other creators and people who are masters of their crafts and really have found success is like maybe they don't believe in it. Where do you stand on staying relevant? Because these times are moving really fast. We just talked about a topic that is accelerating all of it. And then in 5 years, we're probably not even going to be able to need to record this conversation. People are going to do it for us and, whatever it is. And how do you think about relevancy? Two, do you think about yourself as staying relevant over time, or do you just like do what you are most passionate about? And then if you stay relevant, great. And if you don't, then whatever, I'm still doing what I love to do on a day-to-day basis.
I'll be honest. I do feel the tension. I think we probably all do. Of, should I be like scratching at that field that's emerging over there because it's so disruptive? Everyone's asking questions about it. All the investment money is flocking in that direction. It's like there's probably enough energy where I probably do need to pay attention. I just can't ignore it, right? In the case of generative AI. But then again, it's like, okay, my experiments ideally come from a place of honest, authentic conviction. Like I'm curious about that because I want to have my work be better from it, not chase a trend and risk having my work just be dilute because I'm doing a lot of Me Too stuff that my other peers are doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be authentic, and it's got to be from a place of true curiosity. And if the experiment worked to that favor, great. I got some answers, and I'm more smarter from it. I didn't lose anything from it. But ultimately, when it comes to the bigger question of relevance, I think we need to realize or face the fact that we're dealing with a hyper-connected, super diverse world. And if anything, generative AI is going to connect us even tighter together. The world's going to get a lot smaller, a lot faster. So despite the technology, let's not get caught up in tech for tech's sake. If anything, we got to double down on, okay, what does culture mean now? Or in 5 years or 10 years? What does culture mean? How do we stay relevant and true to culture? How do we stay relevant and true to what people actually need? That's tapping into humanity, because the currency of humanity is going to only elevate when everything else is getting automated underneath.
It's true.
Like we have to tap in, we have to lean into like what makes us human, what makes our culture strong, what makes it better for each other and the planet. Like that's what we need to be leaning on, and that's how we stay relevant.
You mentioned doing something that makes us seem human, and something a little bit, I'll call it more old school than generative AI, is you've written a book. And I'm fascinated by that because I've gone on the record on this podcast explaining I've been writing a book now for 3 years, and it's slowly progressing. And I actually use things like this, platforms like this, in real world conversations to probe my ideas and make sure they resonates with other people, or what their initial reaction is, to help mold that idea.
Yes.
As somebody who has written a book, is writing another one, you said you used it as a tool to keep like expanding your message and your core out to new audiences. If anybody's ever thought about writing a book, what do you think, is your message to them? Like, is it worth doing still to this day, like in a world that's filled with tech, or is it not worth it? Is it oversaturated? There's like a zillion books out there, like, about, is there a unique idea that people can even write about these days? Like, where do you stand on writing and publishing and the why behind even doing it?
Yeah, no. I mean, look at it this way. If we zoom out, the historical relevance of books being relevant in our human history goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years. So I think the good thing of all this, even in a bite-sized world where we can snack content through our
Mm-hmm.
smartphones, the relevance of long-form content, the fact that we even like long-form movies, like we sit down and like pay attention to something for a couple hours. I think humanity is drawn to that. And a book is a powerful platform to still like capture a set of arguments that can inform legacy, that can inform canon, that can inform pedagogy. So that's definitely not to be overshadowed by the latest tech and the latest media, snackable media. It's going to be relevant for a long, long time, and you leave a legacy when you do capture your thinking in a book, because it forces someone to immerse in a story that isn't theirs. And the powerful thing that I've experienced in book one, and it's also going to play out for book two, is that I had the choice of just doing a compendium of case studies and benchmarks and frameworks of like what design meant for my professional experience and how it could help someone else. Sound motivation to capture that. But I was writing book one right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, writing it through the summer of George Floyd, all the compounding pandemics that were happening in 2020. And so by the time it came out in 2022, the book took a surprising pivot through the writing process to embrace this notion of lived experience. And so when you pick up book one and when you pick up book two, you're getting, yes, some professional experiences and perspectives and frameworks that can be helpful, but they're all rooted in someone's story. Like they're rooted in lived experience, and it doesn't profess to have all the answers for anyone that's reading it. It's just really it's serving as a mirror. So that person can feel a little bit more creatively curious, creatively courageous to step into their truth from reading someone else's truth. So that's been sort of the surprise for me in my first experience. And the publisher was like, you got to carry that through in book two as well.
Wow. Okay. Well, I think doing it once is amazing, but going back to back and doing it again has got to be even more challenging, right? Because do you feel the urge to like one up your first book?
Yeah, there's that sophomore album in the Booth complex.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like another tier. Somebody recently explained to me, my friend Che. He goes, winning a championship once is great, but if you're able to go back to back, man, those people have legacy, right? And so doing it once is awesome, but doing it again is really, really powerful. Kevin, we've spoken about a ton, and this has been super insightful for myself, and I'm very proud of this conversation. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing. What do you think? Like, I know the curiosity still drives you. Like, where if I asked you if we had this conversation again in 2 years, what would we be celebrating?
I think I honestly don't know like what the next season of my journey will be. If I can tell you right now, I'm scratching at multiple curiosities. I got multiple experiments running. I can't tell you that I'll be still running Dreams Design in Life the way it looks today. It might be incubating products. We might not have clients. We might, be crowdfunding our own projects. Or I might be back in house somewhere because there's a role that I couldn't say no to. I'm open. My aperture is open.
That's awesome. I think there is something about that where do you find that that's a great place to be?
Yeah, again, like we all have those like dark days where it's like, oh, I wish circumstances were different. But when you take a step back and you inventory like what you've been through, it's like I have a lot to be grateful for. I'm not complaining. I'm not a complainer. So I let gratitude sort of drive me forward, and having that mindset keeps my senses sharp to where opportunities emerge and where good people emerge, and I have faith that those relationships will carry me into positive outcomes. So I'm not I'm less anxious now than maybe I was 5, 10 years ago. I have faith that, even through the dark days, the brighter days will come.
Amazing. I love that. As a finishing note, if you had one piece of advice or one practice that you do on a day to day, it could even be that standing desk that you're utilizing. Like, what has been so instrumental in whether it's your creativity or your life, or a piece of advice that always grounds you and roots you? I mean, you just mentioned gratitude, but what can somebody like tangibly implement in their life that's really worked for you?
Through all the different experiences, when I reflect back, curiosity has been the defining thread of every chapter of my experience. And I don't mean that as a platitude, like actually tangibly making it real every day, every week. Like, give yourself a gift. And I'm talking to a lot of friends right now that are affected by these layoffs and things that we spoke of. But even as crappy as the day might feel to someone, you still have to give yourself a gift of, you know what, despite my circumstances, I'm still going to go online. I'm going to find that luminary to reach out to. I'm going to read that book. I'm going to do things out of my day-to-day reality to give myself the gift of knowledge that feeds that curiosity. And the more you lean into curiosity, then it's going to start turning into experiments. You're going to start making things. And someone's going to notice that thing you just made. And then you're now in a new fly loop or flywheel that's going to carry you into a new opportunity. Jobs can come from that. New chapters can come from that. The opportunity to, get on a podcast like this one will come from that. To run a book, like these opportunities will sprout the more you scratch at that curiosity.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for being the luminary in my life and sharing the knowledge based on my curiosity of just learning more about you. So I really, really deeply thank you for your time. I know that you have a lot going on. I hope today was a great start and a little bit more positive from this conversation. Kevin, where could people find you? What's the book title? Where could people buy it? Like, this is your time to shine, baby.
Thank you. So Reimagining Design is the first book published by the MIT Press. But for all things Kevin, go to kevinbethune.com.
Amazing. I love that. Everybody go check it out. Kevin, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, David.